I bought a used Ford, and the navigator, by mistake, plotted a route to a saved point. I decided to check where it was leading, and now the police won't let me go from the interrogations. It's the third day, and I still can't pull myself together. My hands are still shaking, and the same carousel is spinning in my head. I decided to write here because I can't keep this to myself anymore. I warn you in advance, this isn't another horror story for clout. This is the pure truth, which started 72 hours ago and turned my life to hell. First, a little about me. My name is Eli. I'm 31. I work remotely as a software tester, which means I can sit with my laptop anywhere in the world. I live in one of those unremarkable towns in Ohio where the main attraction is a closed furniture factory. I moved here a couple of years ago because it's cheap and quiet. Before that, I lived in Cleveland, but I got tired of the hustle. By nature, I'm not an adventurer, more of an introvert who values his peace. My biggest passion is, as cliché as it sounds, music. I have a whole wall at home covered in guitars, and I can spend hours figuring out some complex blues riff. This is important for the story. My old Honda Civic was starting to go to the great beyond. The suspension was creaking as if a ghost had taken up residence in it, and replacing the catalytic converter would have cost half my salary. I decided to look for something new, or rather, used. I spent a whole month on websites until I came across an ad, a 2015 Ford Fusion, only 70,000 miles, one owner, service book, in perfect condition. The price was suspiciously low. The seller, who introduced himself as Chris, explained that he was urgently leaving for work in California and needed to get rid of the car quickly. We met at a cafe on the highway. Chris turned out to be a guy in his 40s, in a strict shirt, who spoke quietly and politely. The inspection and test drive didn't reveal a single problem. The car was clean. The engine ran like clockwork. It smelled inside of something sharp but not unpleasant, like antiseptic in a clinic. I put it down to the previous owner just loving cleanliness. We transferred the money, signed the papers. I was happy. The first thing I did after getting into the car in the cafe parking lot was connect my phone and dive into the settings of the navigation system. I have a small quirk. I can't stand other people's traces in digital space. Other people's playlists, browser history, saved addresses in the nav, all of it gives me a slight stupor. I cleared the route history, erased all the points from memory. There weren't many. A couple of auto shops, a cafe, some fitness club, and a few addresses in the industrial zone. Nothing criminal. I wiped the screen with my palm, enjoying the feeling of a clean slate. Now it was my car. The next day was Friday. I needed to go to a neighboring town to pick up a new microphone stand I'd won on eBay. The weather was disgusting. A nasty cold drizzle was falling. The sky was leaden. I started the Ford, and the navigator, as usual, suggested, "Plot a route to home?" I was about to hit cancel, but my gaze caught the address. It wasn't my home. The address on the screen was black. 2400 Zavodskoye Shosa, Factory Highway. I knew that street. It was on the far outskirts of town, almost outside the city limits, leading right up to those very abandoned buildings of the furniture factory. An area where you wouldn't find a soul even during the day, let alone at night. A strange feeling, a mixture of curiosity and mild anxiety, gripped me. Maybe it was Chris's address, but he said he lived in a different area. Maybe a system glitch. I rebooted the navigator several times, but the home suggestion with that address kept popping up. Curiosity eventually won out. To hell with it, I thought, I'll drive by just to see what that place is. Maybe it's some cool antique shop or a recording studio I don't know about. I started moving, and the navigator immediately plotted the route. The drive took about 20 minutes. The closer I got to Factory Highway, the more deserted and abandoned the streets became. The rain intensified, turning into a solid wall of water. I drove slowly past rusty fences, half-collapsed warehouses, and fields overgrown with weeds. Finally, the navigator politely announced, "You have arrived at your destination." I stopped the car opposite a long, low building of darkened brick. It was one of many abandoned warehouses, but there was something special about it. The windows weren't just broken, they were boarded up with new, not yet blackened planks. The gates, huge and rusty, were secured with a massive chain and a padlock that, in my opinion, looked too modern and sturdy for this place. Along the perimeter, I noticed several cameras, but it was unclear if they were working or not. Not a single car around, not a soul. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the drumming of rain on my car's roof. I sat like that for about 5 minutes, staring at this building. The feeling of anxiety was growing. Why home? What could have been home here for the previous owner? I looked at the navigator again. In the route history, which I thought I had completely cleared, this point was now highlighted. The system was offering to continue route, so I hadn't erased everything. This address was in the device's memory at a deeper level, in the favorites list or system points. I started feeling uneasy. I turned around and drove home, no longer paying attention to the rain. The whole way, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had done something wrong, that I had violated something. At home, the first thing I did was make strong coffee and sit down at the computer. I started Googling the address. Nothing. No mentions of companies, no news about incidents. Just one of hundreds of abandoned properties in our depressed region. But inside, I was boiling. The next morning, Saturday, I decided to approach it from a different angle. I put the car in the garage and started inspecting it with a flashlight, inch by inch. I had, of course, cleaned the interior, but now I was looking not for trash, but, I don't know, traces. Under the driver's and passenger's seats, I found a few coins, a torn receipt from a gas station, and a dried autumn leaf. Nothing suspicious. Then I moved to the trunk. I rarely used it. Only the spare tire and jack I had bought were in there. Taking them out, I directed the flashlight's beam onto the gray carpet, and I saw them. Next to the spare tire well, right at the edge, were several stains. They were a dark brown, almost rusty color, irregularly shaped, the size of a large coin. They blended into the carpet's texture, and if not for my meticulous inspection, they could have been mistaken for dirt or spilled coffee. But I, like an idiot, reached out and ran my finger over one of them. It was stiff and rough. The carpet in that spot had become prickly. My heart sank. It was blood, dried blood. I started shaking. I recoiled and sat down on the concrete garage floor. I was breathing like I'd just run a marathon. The stains, the abandoned warehouse, the overly polite seller, the too low price. Everything in my head came together into a terrifying, disgusting picture. I climbed back into the trunk, no longer afraid of leaving prints. In the corner, in a niche near the rear taillight where some tool usually lies, I found another item, a small black plastic phone charger. Not a modern compact charger, but an old frog type for older model batteries. I didn't have one like that, and it certainly couldn't have belonged to Chris with his latest iPhone model, which he had taken out during our meeting. I didn't touch anything. Locking the garage, I went up to the house and dialed the police number. Not 911, but the direct line to the precinct. I said I wanted to report a possible find related to, I didn't even know what, to a suspicious car. In less than 20 minutes, 2 detectives were at my house. Detective Hernandez, a woman in her 40s with tired but perceptive eyes, and Detective Graves, a tall, silent man. I told them everything, about the purchase, about the navigator, about the warehouse, about the stains in the trunk, and about the charger. They listened carefully, took notes, almost without interrupting. Then we went to the garage. They photographed the trunk, carefully placed the charger into a bag, took samples from those very stains using some kind of cotton swabs and vials. Hernandez asked if I would mind if they took the car for a more thorough examination. I, of course, agreed. I didn't even want to touch it anymore. The car was taken away on a tow truck. They told me to wait for a call. Those hours of waiting were the longest of my life. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living room, looked at the guitars, and couldn't bring myself to pick up a single one. All the details were replaying in my head. The smell of antiseptic in the cabin, the overly clean interior, the too low price. The call only came this morning. It was Hernandez. Her voice was serious, emotionless. "Mr. Eli, we'd like to inform you of the preliminary examination results. First, the DNA analysis from the stains in your car's trunk came back with a positive match. It's the blood of Sophia Larson, a girl who went missing 9 months ago on her way home from college. Her case was almost closed." I stopped breathing. "Second, the charger you found was identified by her parents. It belonged to her. She carried it in her backpack, as she had an older model phone. And the address?" I managed to squeeze out. "The warehouse on Factory Highway. We conducted a search there last night. In the basement, we found traces of people being there, empty water bottles, food wrappers, and, most importantly, microparticles of fabric from the jacket Sophia was wearing on the day of her disappearance. It seems this place was used as a temporary point where they were held before being transported somewhere else. Your navigator mistakenly saved the last point that the previous owners of the car had designated as home. For them, it was probably routine work." She paused. "Mr. Eli, you bought a car that, according to our data, was used in conjunction with other vehicles in a series of abductions in our and neighboring states over the past year and a half. The seller, Chris, does not exist. The documents were forged. You turned out to be the only one who could give us a lead in Sophia's case, and possibly in other cases. The Larson family, they would like to thank you." I hung up. I'm still shaking. I'm sitting in my quiet, safe house, and I understand that I accidentally touched someone else's monstrous nightmare. I didn't just buy a car. I bought evidence of someone else's tragedy, and that home in the Navigator will haunt me for a very long time. Story 2. I want to share what happened to me because even now, my heart races when I remember every little detail. My name is Kelly. I'm 26. I live in a small 2-story house in a Chicago suburb, and I never thought my quiet, solitary life could turn into a nightmare. This is true, and I can't stay silent. I recently moved into this house. It's simple, cozy, white horizontal siding, windows with dark frames, a large yellow door, almost the perfect, quiet suburban home. The neighbors are friendly, and there's never any strange noise. I work from home. I'm a freelance writer, so I'm alone most of the day and evenings. A couple of weeks after moving in, I began noticing something strange. Every evening, around 8:45, 9 when the lights in the living room came on, someone would step outside in front of my house and stand there motionless, pointing a camera at the facade. At first, I dismissed it as maybe someone local, perhaps an urban blogger filming suburban homes, maybe a photographer working on a portfolio. I jokingly told my friends, "Maybe I'm Chicago's new attraction." I laughed. The suburban Instagram blogger finally noticed me. But when it started happening every day, at exactly the same time, my chest began to tighten. This wasn't just an observer, someone seemed to be waiting. One evening, I decided to watch for myself. I sat on the couch in the living room with my laptop, pretending to work, but my eyes kept darting to the window. I saw him clearly, a tall silhouette, black jacket, cap, camera in hand. He was standing 3 steps from the sidewalk, unmoving, just filming. My heart stopped for a second, and I thought, if I go outside, he might get scared, or someone might see me and think I'm paranoid. But he didn't move. He just stood there until I turned off the light and went to the bedroom. From then on, I began recording the time. He appeared almost without fail, every evening, no matter the weather. Rain, warm nights, under the dim streetlights. Sometimes I even felt that he waited until the lights came on, as if it mattered to him that I was inside. A few weeks later, late at night, I checked my email and saw a new message with no subject, from an unknown sender. I almost never opened emails like that because of constant spam, but something made me click. Inside were 30 photos. My heart trembled as I scrolled through them. The first were views of my house, the facade, the windows, the corner of the roof. Then the shots became more intimate. Photos of the interior, the kitchen, the living room, the bathroom, the bedroom. I saw my favorite mug on the table, my books on the shelf, my shoes by the door, everything, as if someone had been watching me every second. The photos were taken from low angles, through cracks, through doorways. I even saw my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I was standing, fixing my hair, unaware I was being photographed. And there were exactly 30 of these images. The last photo caught me sleeping. I was lying on my side, my hand hanging off the bed, hair tousled, and the soft light fell across my face. I slammed my laptop shut, nearly in tears. It was insane. How could someone have gotten in? Where had he been standing? How did he access my apartment? I called the police immediately. When the officers arrived, I told them everything, showed them the photos, noted the times he appeared. They did a cursory check, walked the perimeter, checked for signs of broken windows, but found nothing. No fingerprints, no traces of entry. Everything seemed clean, perfectly closed. No evidence. An older officer shrugged. No break-in hard to prove someone entered. Maybe he's just peering inside. His colleague added that he could be a slightly crazy photographer, but if he wasn't committing anything criminal, in their view, there wasn't much to do. I returned home feeling vulnerable. The police recommended installing cameras by the windows, but offered no promise of fast action. After that, I tried to keep up my spirits, but each evening the anxiety returned. As soon as the lights came on, I watched the window warily. One night, when I was nearly asleep, I heard a faint clicking sound, slow but distinct, like the click of a camera shutter. I froze, breathing so quietly my lungs seemed too loud. I got up and moved to the wall opposite the window, listening. One click, then a second. It came from the wall, not outside, but inside, as if someone was right behind the wall, slightly to the back, setting up a camera and quietly photographing me through a crack. Goosebumps covered me. My heart felt like it would leap out. I stood there, holding my breath, unsure whether to scream or move. Then the noise stopped. I returned to bed, trembling all over. The next evening, I decided not to sit idle. I turned the living room and bedroom into a sort of observation post, rearranged the couch, placed the laptop by the window, left the light on to see if he would appear. I felt like a trapped prey, but I understood I had no choice. Time passed, and again, around 9 p.m., I saw his silhouette, the familiar figure, cap, camera in hand. He stopped and focused the lens on my window, and I suddenly froze, staring at the dark figure. He froze. I held my breath. Silence lasted a minute. Then he turned off the device and left, just as quickly as he appeared. I heard his steps, the faint stir of the wind, then everything went still. I knew it was him, and that he had left again. I was terrified, exhausted from sleepless nights, but I no longer wanted to be a victim. I bought an old metal rolling pin, the one my grandmother had given me once. It was heavy, cold, a perfect improvised weapon, if I had to defend myself. I also bought a simple motion detector and a webcam, which I set up on the desk, facing the window. It pointed directly at the bedroom door and window. I even arranged low lighting. A small lamp on the nightstand remained on, so I could see silhouettes. I may have become paranoid, but my instincts were right. And then one night, it happened. I was sitting at my laptop, eyes tired, hands shaking slightly. The room was dark except for the night lamp. The motion detector sat on the nightstand. The camera was recording. I was ready. Around 2:15 a.m., I heard a rustling, the sound of a door slightly opening. My heart pounded. I rose slowly, rolling pin in hand, and approached the window. Shadows moved in the hallway. The man who had been standing outside all those evenings had gotten inside. I could see his silhouette moving quietly, as if he knew exactly where to go. I couldn't believe he had come through the window, but it was slightly open, and he clearly took advantage. He stood right in front of my bed. There was no camera or it was hidden, but I felt a surge of adrenaline when our eyes met. I raised the rolling pin with both hands and froze. He stared at me. His eyes were cold, void-like. Then I struck. He didn't even have time to react. The pain, the metallic sound, and he collapsed to the floor. I didn't scream, but my heart felt like it would burst. The rolling pin slipped from my hands as I recoiled. He lay unconscious. After striking him, I called 911. I sank to my knees beside him, catching my breath. My heart raced, my hands shook, and I felt like I was about to collapse. I dialed 911, my voice trembling. "Please, a man." He broke in. "I hit him. He's not moving." The officers arrived quickly, or at least it seemed quick to me. When they came in, I was shaking, holding the door handle, unable to believe it was real. They found the man unconscious near my bedroom, wearing a black jacket and cap. On the floor, several cameras, lenses, and memory cards scattered around. I showed them the photos he had sent, my laptop with the email, and everything I had recorded that night. The police began their investigation. They interviewed me, examined my cameras, and took the man in handcuffs. He turned out to be a local, Jared Miller, 34. His apartment, just a few blocks away, contained countless recordings, cameras, wires, and, more horrifyingly, a portfolio with photographs of other people's homes and individuals he had systematically stalked. The officers said Jared had been doing this for a long time. He photographed homes, apartments, people, and kept his archive. His apartment contained thousands of photos. He also had recordings that showed obsession, planning, and surveillance. He was fixated. I was moved to a safe place for a while and given a psychologist. I only managed to sleep after several nights, still haunted by the fear that he could come through a camera, return, or something else might go unnoticed. I still live in this house, but I have reinforced the windows, installed blinds, and added extra cameras and a security system. My world will never be the same, but I survived. I want to say this to anyone reading. Don't ignore strange signals. If something feels wrong, record it, document it, report it, protect yourself. Sometimes a simple rolling pin or any heavy object can save your life. The police are your allies. Even if at first it seems they can't do much, persist and keep evidence. I never thought an ordinary move could turn into a psychological nightmare, but it did. And perhaps I only saved myself because I didn't give up. If you've experienced anything similar, please be careful. You are not alone, and you can survive. Story 3. My name is Betty Morrison. I'm 28 years old, and I work as an architect in Lincoln, Nebraska. My life is all about blueprints, deadlines, and endless cups of coffee that I drink while staring out the huge window in our office on the 9th floor. I'm not the kind of person who seeks adventure. My evenings usually end with a book or a TV series on the couch with my cat, Houdini. I appreciate predictability. Perhaps that's why what happened carved such a painful scar into my meticulously planned world. It all started last Friday. I was working late. I had to finish the project for the new community center. The clock showed almost 11 at night when I finally closed my laptop. The city had already grown quiet, the lights of the neon signs flickering in the night, promising emptiness. My car, an old but faithful Toyota Camry, was alone in the multi-story parking garage. The echo of my footsteps bounced off the concrete walls, and, as usual, I quickened my pace, feeling a slight chill. I got on the I-80 highway. At night, it's a long, dark ribbon of asphalt leading to nowhere. The streetlights were left behind in the city, and only my headlights picked out the lane markings and the occasional roadside sign from the darkness. I turned on a podcast, something about the history of architecture, trying to drown out the growing fatigue. The first 20 minutes were calm. I noticed headlights in the rear-view mirror sometime after the Valley View exit. Just 2 distant points. I didn't think much of it. But when I turned off the interstate onto the old county road, no 34A, longer but more scenic route to my house in the Spring Creek suburb, those headlights turned after me. Coincidence, I told myself mentally. The road here was deserted, with a couple of lonely farms and fields stretching into the darkness. I slowed down, deciding to test my theory. The stranger slowed down too. I sped up, he did the same. A perfect, frightening distance was maintained between us. Then I decided to turn off. I remembered that there should be an old access road to an abandoned grain elevator somewhere around here. I jerked the wheel sharply to the right, gravel crunching under the tires. My heart was pounding in my throat. I watched in the mirror. The headlights behind me repeated my maneuver without hesitation. They were a bit closer now, and I could make out the lun quo of the car, a dark, probably black or dark blue SUV. A Mercedes, a BMW. I don't know cars. It was just big, dark, and faceless. I got back on the asphalt, the pressure building in my chest. I tried another trick. I slammed on the brakes suddenly, as if I was going to stop. He did the same, not getting closer, not falling behind. It was a game, and he was setting the rules. I dialed 911 on my phone, but didn't press call. What would I say? There's a car following me that's following me? It seemed absurd. Instead, I hit the gas. The next 15 minutes were hell. I flew down the winding road, my Camry leaning on the curves, tires squealing. He was my shadow, my reflection, perfectly mirroring every move, every lane change. His headlights in the mirror became the hypnotic eyes of some nocturnal predator. I raced through the sleeping Spring Creek, turned onto my street, Elm Street quiet, dark, with lonely streetlights casting yellow circles on the asphalt. My house was at the end of a cul-de-sac, a white cottage with blue shutters, my sanctuary. I pulled into the driveway, turned off the ignition with trembling hands. The headlights behind me stopped right at my lawn. I held my breath, pressing myself into the seat, staring into the mirror. I waited for the door to open, for someone to get out, but nothing happened. The car sat there for maybe 30 seconds. Then its headlights smoothly traced an arc. It turned around on the narrow street and slowly, without haste, drove off in the same direction we had come from. I sat there, unable to move, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine. More than an hour passed. I closed all the shutters, checked all the locks, made myself some tea that I couldn't drink. My hands were still shaking. I had almost convinced myself that it was just some creepy coincidence, maybe a drunk driver or someone who was just lost. I was sitting in the living room hugging a pillow when my phone vibrated. An unknown number. The message was short. I opened it, and the world around me collapsed. "Nice bedroom you have. You should close the curtains." A cold sharper than any blade pierced me. I didn't run to look out the window. I didn't scream. I just froze, because I understood. He wasn't just following me. He was here. He was watching. And those words weren't a threat. They were a statement of fact. The game had only just begun, and I didn't even know the rules. I don't remember how I got to the bedroom. I think I flew there, stumbling over my own feet, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts. My hands were shaking as I forcefully pulled the cord, closing the heavy drapes. The room plunged into utter darkness, broken only by a thin strip of light under the door. I leaned my forehead against the cold glass of the window, shielded by the fabric, and tried to catch my breath. He saw. He was here. Outside. He was watching me. My first impulse was to call the police. I dialed the number, my fingers fumbling. The voice on the other end was calm, almost bored. Gasping for breath, I blurted out my story. The chase on the highway, the dark SUV, the message. The desk officer, who introduced himself as Sergeant Miles, listened and asked standard questions. Car model? Don't know. License plate? Didn't see it. Description of the driver? None. I could hear a slight irritation creeping into his voice, masked by professional sympathy. "Ma'am, we'll check the number the message came from," he said, "but it's most likely spoofed. We'll patrol your area. Lock your doors. If anything happens, call immediately." It was a brush-off. I knew it. To them, I was just a hysterical woman who had watched too many thrillers. They hadn't seen those headlights in the mirror. They hadn't felt that soul-chilling control with which he mirrored my every move. I sank to the floor in the bedroom, hugging my knees. The message kept burning on my phone screen. I reread it 20 times. "Nice bedroom you have. You should close the curtains." Every word was a blow. He wasn't just threatening. He was sharing an intimate knowledge with me. He had seen my personal space, the place where I was supposed to feel safe, and now he was profaning it with a single sentence. The next few days passed in a fog of paranoia. I didn't go to work, citing illness. I didn't answer friends' calls. Every shadow outside the window seemed like him. Every creak in the house was his step. I installed extra locks on the doors, bought a surveillance system with 2 cameras, one for the front door, one for the backyard. I installed them myself, my hands still shaking. At night, I slept with a heavy baseball bat under the bed, the one that had once belonged to my father. Houdini, my cat, sensed my tension and clung to me, his quiet purring my only comfort. The police called back 2 days later. The number the message came from was registered to a fake account, bought with Bitcoin. Untraceable. There was nothing they could do. I thanked them and hung up, feeling the walls of my small, safe world crumbling. And then the second message came. Not an hour later, not a day later, a week later, exactly at 11:47 p.m., the same minute as the first one. Houdini likes to sleep at the foot of the bed. Cute. The blood froze in my veins. He wasn't just looking in the window. He had watched long enough and carefully enough to know my cat's habits. This meant he had been here again. Or maybe he was watching right now. I panicked, rushing to check the cameras, the recording from the last 24 hours. Nothing. Not a soul. Not a single suspicious shadow. It was even more frightening. He was a ghost, an intangible threat hanging in the air, one I couldn't catch. It was then that I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. Fear was turning me into a recluse, a prisoner in my own home. I couldn't let him win by simply breaking me from the inside. Anger, slow and smoldering, began to ignite where there had once been only paralyzing terror. He thought he was in control? Fine, let's play. I started to analyze. Why did he follow me that particular night? Coincidence? I doubt it. He knew where I lived. So he had been watching me before. He knew my route. I remembered working late that Friday. How I had visited a new coffee shop during the day. How I had chatted with a colleague in the parking lot. Someone could have seen me. Someone could have decided I was the perfect target. I reviewed the camera footage from the moment they were installed, scanning through hours of boring static video. And then I saw it. Not a person. On the recording from the backyard camera, taken last night, a shadow fell into the frame for 3 seconds. A long, distorted shadow, cast from the side, from the direction of the wooded slope behind my house. The shadow of a person. It froze, and then smoothly retreated. He hadn't approached the house. He was watching from a distance, from cover. That was all I needed. Proof that he was real. And his observation point. The next morning, I went to a local hardware store and bought half a dozen cheap but powerful motion sensor lights. I spent the whole day installing them around the perimeter of the property, especially carefully along the border with the woods. I was no longer a passive victim. I was setting traps. Night fell over Spring Creek, heavy and quiet. I turned off the lights in the house and settled in the living room, by the window overlooking the backyard, curtained with a thin fabric through which I could see. The baseball bat lay beside me. I waited. Time dragged on agonizingly slowly. Midnight passed, then 1 a.m., then 2. Houdini curled up in a ball on my lap. I was almost dozing off when suddenly click. One of the spotlights at the edge of the woods flared on sharply, flooding the clearing and the tree line with bright white light. And there he was. A tall man in a dark hooded jacket, the hood pulled low over his face. He froze, blinded by the sudden light, raising a hand to shield his eyes. He was only 50 yards from my house. My heart sank, then rose to my throat again, clenched in a tight knot of rage and fear. He was real, not a ghost, flesh and blood. He didn't run. Instead, he slowly lowered his hand and, tilting his head, looked directly in my direction, as if he could feel my gaze through the curtain. We froze in that silent standoff, him circled in light, me in the darkness. It probably lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then he turned and disappeared into the darkness of the woods. The spotlight continued to burn, illuminating the empty clearing. I didn't call the police. What would I tell them? I saw a man in my woods. It would lead nowhere. But in that moment, something inside me finally broke and reassembled. The hunt was over. Now the war was beginning. The next morning, I went into the garage and found an old, unused mobile phone. A cheap flip phone. I inserted a prepaid SIM card into it, bought with cash in a neighboring town. Then I sent a single message to that same unknown number. I'm tired of this. Go away, or I will find you myself. I didn't expect a reply. I was throwing down the gauntlet. I was giving his control back to him. The reply came 2 hours later. No text, just a photograph, a vague, dark one, apparently taken through a window. It showed the silhouette of a person sitting in a chair. My chair, in my living room. The picture was taken from inside my house. That was the final straw that broke the camel's back. All my anger, all my resolve crystallized into one cold, clear understanding. Escape was impossible. The police were powerless. This house, my sanctuary, could no longer be protected. It had to be abandoned. That same day, I started to act. I didn't pack suitcases that would take too long. I took my passport, laptop, a few essential items, and Houdini's carrier. It all fit into one sports bag. I left everything connected to the old Betty behind. Her life had ended that night on the highway. Late in the evening, after dark, I drove the car out of the garage and, without turning on the headlights, slowly drove away from my street. I didn't look back. I drove for several hours without stopping, crossed 3 state lines, until I found a cheap motel on the side of a highway in Wyoming, where I could pay with cash and no questions were asked. Right now, I'm writing this from a different room, in a different city, under a different name. I don't know who he was. Maybe an ex-boyfriend of my neighbor's whom I'd seen a couple of times. Maybe a worker from the service that fixed my washing machine. Or maybe just a stranger who one day chose me for no reason at all. I don't feel safe. Maybe I never will. But I am alive. I didn't let him lock me in that bedroom with the nice curtains forever. He took my home, my name, my sense of peace, but he didn't take me. Sometimes at night, I think I see those headlights in the rearview mirror again. It's just phantom pain, a scar on my psyche, or maybe not. I'll never be sure. So I keep driving. And this time, I'm looking not only ahead but also back, always back.